So here we go, another dialogue with a conscious thought leader. And today is a first in one particular sense. And I think none of you are aware about it. How can you? Because it's the first time we have the same invitee. I found the conversation with Bob Anderson. Some few may have witnessed it. It was in March last year. Some few may have picked up that old dialogue. And we delved in on what is called the leadership circle. And Bob has ample, with my limited knowledge, would think of maybe one of the people with the most broad knowledge on leadership skills, and then translating it into such a beautiful holistic tool as Leadership Circle. This is when we discovered, wow, there's another level, another phase, something beyond that, and we'll explore that, which is what in the invitation is called the meta capabilities or capacities. Let me quickly do one more housekeeping as well. This is called Dialogue with Conscious Thought Leader, and it is meant to be a dialogue. So the invitation is that throughout the conversation, certainly for the second half, but there's no limitation here, no hard limitation, you're invited to share not only your questions and ask questions to Bob, but actually your comments. So we want this to be an interaction to the degree that you're interested and want to participate. Put it in the chat. That's the invitation. And I, as a moderator, take the freedom to basically filter out the questions. And I may invite you, keep that in mind, I may invite you to actually word your question directly. And sometimes I may just group one or two questions which are alike. Having said this, let me do a very brief intro on Bob. He's here in this beautiful winter, in front of his beautiful wintry backyard. It's not a picture. We asked that question. Is this real? Yes, it's real. And he'll probably tell us where he's calling from in a second. I'll do this very quick. So I already mentioned the leadership circle. And later I'm going to give you a reference to it, unless you Google it already. And some of you may actually know it and use it. Great. This is what he's best known for, at least to me and to many people that actually are dear to me. And I have made that training, got that certification. Co-founder, I think he was a co-CEO or CEO of the Leadership Circle for many, many, many years. Many, many, many years. Actually, this is what he's most known to. He is known as an author. I think he has written 3 books. One of them, the one that I enjoyed most. 2, okay, Mastering Leadership. And exactly. And then there's one called Breakthrough Performance and Extraordinary Business Results. Did I get that right?
Yeah, one is Mastering Leadership, the other is Scaling Leadership.
Scaling Leadership. Sorry,
Yeah,
exactly.
I can't remember the subtitles.
No, I think I took one of the subtitles. And what actually he equally teaches, I don't know if you still do that, at the Steyer Center of Executive Education of the University of Notre Dame. And as that, I actually wanted to start not at the Leadership Circle, but I wanted to maybe have you explain, taking that as a foundation, how did you get to the meta capacities in the last 30, 40 years? What got you here? I'm sure you didn't have some of these insights back 20, 30, or 35 years ago. So give us a sense of how this matured in you, but actually coming to these observations before we dive into what these capacities actually are.
Yeah, it's a good start because there's a distinction between the meta capacities and the stage of awareness on which they most readily boot up. And so as you progress through, and the leadership circles built on a stage development framework. So as you progress beyond into creative, which only about 20% of adults fully configure that kind of an inner operating system, there are many, many stages actually beyond that if you look into the wisdom traditions. So what I'm really focused on now is what's the next transition and what comes along with that or becomes more accessible as you move beyond that threshold of what we have called creative leadership, or what Bob Kagan calls self-authoring into self-transforming, Terry O'Fallon calls it a third tier, the meta-aware tier of development. And so what I'm really focused on is what is that? How do you develop it? And what comes along with it? And how do you develop those capacities? So where did that come from? Well, that's a life story. I I was taught to meditate by a priest who wrote a book called Christian Zen when I was a
Okay.
freshman in college. Now, that's a heretical title in those days. But he was the foremost person in the Catholic tradition in the dialogue between the Christian monastic tradition and the Zen Buddhist tradition. And uh, I was galvanized by what he said. And so that began a process. Then he taught me to meditate, and I've been doing that ever since. And of course, that has a way of expanding and opening. I
Mm.
spent 4 years in the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, which is an intense 4 year process to open up higher sense perception and put them in service of energy healing and actually doing physical healing through energy work. And in fact, one of the deans that was there then is still teaching in the school and is now a part of our Unity Academy. So we're bringing in these capacities that we can develop into some of our training. That really was a can opener, and actually, it was in those years that the model that's underneath the leadership circle profile congealed and went to the next level. And it was after coming out of that that I created the leadership circle profile. So I've been in this practice for a long, long time. And it's actually the deep underpinnings of the profile. Like the profile is like a, a lily pad that sits on a much deeper pond
Mm.
of wisdom traditions. And so what I'm really excited about now is the fact that you can look across these wisdom traditions in ways that we've never had available before and start to see how they're different and how amazingly similar they are when you start to map them, what they're saying about the nature of reality. And then I've been in a long-term inquiry in quantum physics now and how that maps to the same description of reality. So what's emerging if leaders move to the next level, or if we really want to change the world and what's unfolding in the world, we need one, this later stage leadership is required. And two, we have to boot all of that up on a new paradigm, a paradigm that's not built on our separateness, um, uh, but one that's built on the inherent unity that is reality. So you got to get that we're actually functioning, most of us, in a paradigm that is neutered compared with what has been, and it's been excised out a lot of what I'm going to talk about here. So
Okay.
when we teach this, people go, "Wow, this is crazy stuff." And then once they start to embody it and practice it and play with it, they go,
Mm.
"Wow, this is crazy stuff." It's a whole different. This is amazing, and they get it, and so, um, but they come out of it saying, "I'm in a completely different understanding of reality,
Okay.
worldview, myself,
Okay.
and so on." So that's what we're working on right now.
Thanks. So let's take our audience step by step into it. And I'm taking the freedom to jump directly into the question
Go.
for the 8 meta capacities. Because unless we're a little bit more specific, everything you say about different level, different stage, and different level of consciousness, you use the term unity, and I understand better why, where you articulate that and bring it together, you call it the Unity Academy. It may not become specific enough unless we move into the 8 meta capacities. What are those? And I invite you, I'm sure you've done that a lot of times, give a one or two sentence just overview for people so they can get a flavor of it. And I'm going to put them in the chat while we speak so people can actually follow. You don't have to write it down or rehearse them. Um, Give us a quick one or two sentences to these
Yeah.
eight meta capacities.
Well, in the model that I've created, there's a center line, and it's actually a toroidal center line. So the core energetic um, core of it is a tension or a kind of dialectic between higher purpose and deep shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the meta capacities is the ability to open into a higher sense of purpose. The shift from self-authorship to self-transforming or into this integral is a shift from I'm self-authoring a life,
Okay.
I'm creating a sense of purpose. This is what,
Yep.
two, no, I'm now surrendered to a larger purpose that wants to move through me. And the capacity to open and allow the future that's trying um, to come through and to be known uh, is the capacity here. Now,
Which is
next to that, go
that's the one
ahead.
you call higher purpose, right?
Right.
Okay.
Next to that in the model is intuition,
Okay.
because this plays a vital role here, and it's a capacity we all have, and it can be developed to be able to receive. See, because in this paradigm, reality is a energetic frequency informational field. It's all a field. So our capacity to understand that, expand, open into it, and then be a conduit for receiving information, what to say in the moment in a coaching session, what my life's purpose is, what the strategy of the business needs to be. Um, you get information, and that's been a practice of mine for many, many years. And most of what I've created has its genesis here in moments of never would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot to unpack those moments rationally and bring them into being, but it's been led by intuition. So that's a capacity. Next to that is innovation. So, and these are related. What's the new future that's trying to emerge through me on the planet, in my organization, technologically, depending on my focus of work and life? What's the innovation process to bring into
Mm-hmm.
being new stuff? We're in a time when we have to completely reinvent our relationship with society, with the world, with each other, with energy, with the planet, with the environment, with uh, governance, with political systems. All of it has to be rethought. We can see it's collapsing under its own weight now. And nobody has the answers to that. So intuition informing higher purpose, translating into breakthroughs, innovative breakthroughs in whatever area of our endeavor. Those are meta capacities.
I assume you relate to in the list that I published, which comes from your website. You call that system transformation. Is
No,
that the one?
that's innovation, and that leads system transformation. So
Oh, okay.
one of the markers of this later stage development is it moves from good strategic capability into it keeps that, and then it opens that up into a much broader systemic awareness and uh, how ecosystems cohere, how a small change here in this part of the system could have a highly leveraged effect throughout the system. All of this becomes much more unintended consequences and so on down the road. We become designers of systems and ecosystems. And so it's not only that I'm operating as a leader in the welfare of my business and the systemic understanding of my business, but I'm also seeing how my business plays in a larger ecosystem, can influence and actually shape it. And on the largest scale, it's how all that plays to shape the world. And so
Okay.
this is a meta capacity. And then the innovations are also systemic. We have to reinvent the systems that we're operating in. So the next capacity, which informs all of this, and its opposite higher purpose, is shadow. And
Okay.
the more light that we open into, the more we embody higher frequencies and energies, the more we invite shadow to emerge in us and in the collective. So shadow, all this stuff around shadow, what that's a jargon word for our deep traumas, um, and deep distortions, things that parts of ourselves that we said, that's not okay. I have to sequester that away because it gets me in trouble. Um, and so we literally have cut off parts of ourselves, parts of our essence, and compacted them uh, and kind of frozen them in time, and we don't have access to them. But the more we open to these higher frequencies, the more those parts come back and say, now there's enough light here to be met and remembered, to join the dance, if you will.
Hmm.
So, and that's essential if we want like half of the energy that we could embody more of, the higher frequencies. To go higher you have to go lower. So if we want to open into this, well, then we also have to open into this and how to meet the shadow with deep compassion, warm invitation, embrace, radical yes is a capacity. And it's a
Okay.
marker for integral development. The capacity to hold the dark and the light in a loving embrace is a marker for development. And that's where healing happens. And that then informs the system. And I become a leader that's not so triggered. I don't make enemies. When, Gorbachev was here, when he met with Reagan, he says, you and I aren't so different. You build bombs, we build bombs. What he was doing was seeing the system and seeing his part in it. He wasn't projecting an enemy. And he literally said to Reagan, I'm here to deprive you of an enemy. That's an integral, that kind of statement can only be found from this later stage mindset and a systemic awareness and an ability to hold my own shadow and our collective shadow and our part in the dance and not blame, not make wrong, right? And then the next capacity is dialogue. All of this informs dialogue. Intuition, I think of dialogue as collective intuition. It's people coming together, leaders, people coming together to sit at the edge of and even move into the unknown together. Like nobody knows how to create what's trying to be created. The complexity we're facing is beyond anyone. So, how do we step into the unknown, which is pregnant with possibility, and be informed by it? Let reality
Hmm.
inform what's trying to happen. Listening at the shores of the great silence, if you will. And then we start to speak what we're getting together. And as Senge said, dialogue, Senge said, truth will out, truth comes through, dialogos. Something emerges. So we have individual intuition, but we also have collective intuition that and of course, some of those dialogues happen in deep conflict, so I have to be able to manage shadow and not project an enemy. I'm actually there presuming that my perspective is partial, not whole. And the reason I know it's partial is because of the embeddedness of the conflict we're in. If it, these long-term conflicts, um, what if we could enter them going, I know that my perspective is partial because we can't solve this. I need the perspective of my opponent, my enemy, right? And that's how dialogue can change the world, actually. But it presumes all these other things.
Yeah.
And then at the core of the model is presence. That leaders, all of this, the more we open, see, the shadow is the shadow is all contracted light. It's contracted essence of ourselves. And and we hold it both individually, we hold it collectively. It may be even be past life energies. And the more we open into them and remember them, unwound them, unwind them, the more light we can embody. And the more we can
Mm,
open into the higher frequencies with practice, the more light we can embody. And we become more of a transformative presence in the room. Just the energy that we embody has a catalytic uh, quality to it that creates a field for the kind of inquiry and dialogue, exploration, breakthrough, intuition that I'm talking about. It's also catalytic of deep healing. So for coaches or consultants, the
yeah,
presence we bring
yeah.
is the gift. And so those are the primary um, meta capacities. There's many different things in each of those buckets, but those are the
Maybe
capacities that come
let,
along.
let, let me resume that. I don't know if the last one, the presence, equally in some other list you call manifestation, or is that different?
Well, uh, that's a good one. A manifestation would fit over on the whole right half of the model, which is innovation and systems and bringing into being. Good call, because when we open into the field, we can work in it. It works us, it informs us, but we also inform it. We're doing this all the
Okay.
time anyway.
Okay.
We are informing the field. The question is, can we do that consciously, and can we do that at higher and higher frequencies or power, or higher frequencies, higher power? So if you look, say, at the work of Joe Dispenza, this is what he's doing. He's having people open up their energetic system, get into very expanded states,
Okay.
and then call forth the future, because this is how reality actually operates. So the ability to manifest results gets amped up here.
So let me just, for the benefit of myself, but more importantly to the audience, let me recap just a single terms, if I got you right, because I kept
Yep.
actually a record of what you said. I understood you started with higher purpose, intuition, innovation. I think I understand that, which then feeds into system transformation, shadow, dialogue, presence. Did I
Yeah.
get these right?
Yeah.
Okay, because at some point, I just want to make sure that we're clear among the audience what actually we're talking about. And one thing that is coming up in my mind immediately when I listen to you, and I find it not only fascinating, but relatively easy to listen to you because, and people that know me know that I'm practicing Buddhist. I teach meditation to executives. Many of the terms you refer to have a spiritual connotation and they go beyond the realm of heart management practices. They're deeply personal, opening up, letting go, working one's egocentrism, connecting. Unity is key here. So that opens up an important question. How does this relate? And I hope there's a short answer because I'm sure books will be written about it. Give us a sense of how you help leaders practice this in a business environment.
Yeah.
Help us to translate this into what would leaders do differently on a day-to-day basis in one or two simple examples. And I know you teach that. That's part of what you do in the Unity Academy. So it becomes tangible what that means, how it
Yeah.
manifests in a
Well,
leadership role.
yeah, it's a great question. Um, for leaders, um, the primary focus is, how do I grow, develop, enhance the creative capacity of the organization? So, what if you could deploy yourself into circumstances in a way that really opened up much greater capacity, uh, that improved the quality of your leadership conversations so you could cut through all the political BS that often happens in meetings. Really learn to tell the truth in a great way and catalyze innovation, catalyze breakthrough strategy, vision, direction for the company. Leadership is the deployment of self into circumstances. What self are you deploying?
Mm-hmm.
And how you deploy yourself in every moment has everything to do with what can happen, what can open, what can unfold. And so being more and more conscious about how to do that and how to move that to a much higher level of impact that's subtle, that we don't talk about, is what we're up to. And leaders are very interested when it's how do we help the organization become more creative. And so we use one of the practices that we're using and taking further, we use Aikido, for example,
Okay.
because Aikido is embodied and it's an energetic practice at its essence. In its purest form, the energy is moving me. I'm not doing Aikido.
Okay,
And
interesting. It is
you get
moving me. I'm not moving it. Okay.
right. And so when you get people even just playing with this, it opens up pathways. Do a little Aikido, put them on an intuition walk, they come back, and the conversation just is radically different in terms of ideas and things that weren't there before. And so the other thing we see is that when a leader, any leader in the group, can vulnerably drop into an aspect of themselves that's in the way, call it shadow, call it whatever you want, and do that vulnerably, it opens up and unleashes energy and creativity in the room every time. And so that's what we're really after: energy, creativity, new vision, breakthrough, new ideas, a higher quality of conversation.
Okay.
So the same is true for coaches or consultants. How you show up has everything to do with what can happen in the room. And I mean that you don't have to say a word, and you show up in full presence or more presence as you are able to
Hmm.
embody, stuff happens that wouldn't happen otherwise. And we're getting more and more reports of that from people that have been through the academy. I can't explain it, but there are conversations and results opening up with groups I lead that weren't happening before. And so and part of why I'm so interested in
Interesting.
paradigm of reality is because we don't have an accurate understanding of reality. So we dismiss this stuff as, yeah, let's get down to what the action plan is. And we just miss all these meta capacities and higher powers that can actually break us through.
Thanks. You mentioned one or two things which lead me to the next question. You you talked about, I don't recall the exact wording, but I will term it as a state of being. How to show up, the presence. That's the word you used, the presence.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of a prior guest, very prominent entrepreneur, very successful in his way, who had a key practice, and I want to share it and here for people, that was to get feedback and learn how he showed up. As simple as that. In the beginning of meetings, etc. And it was interesting, exactly to what you said, how you show up, the type of energy you transmit, the attitudes you carry, the look, the smile, the inclusiveness, that actually resonates. And that leads
Yeah.
me to the next question. And I'm going to start with just a little quote out of your webpage. And I found it interesting. In any situation, transformation often has less to do with what you do, the methodology you use, or even the words you speak, It has far more to do with the state of being from which you act and speak. Maybe
Yeah.
you can elaborate a bit more. When you speak to state of being, what do you refer to?
Well, let me give you an example. I'll try to shortcut this story. We were leading a certification. Person co-training with me was new to leading it. And so the first day was fairly frenetic, and I think the group was struggling with how to get on to the work. I knew day two was pivotal, and if you've been through the certification, you open with a very deep conversation. It's like, okay, now we're dropping in. And he came in frazzled with business issues, and his energy was all over the place. And he was like, I can't lead today. Can you do it? I said, and I was kind of relieved actually, because I knew that the day wouldn't work from that energy. Now I have a practice that I've talked about, and I spend time every morning for about an hour, hour and a half before a day like this, getting my energy really cooking, present, aligned, working any shadow issues that are emerging, fears, doubts, all that stuff. So I can walk in and be as authentic and present as I can be. And I won't get into how I dropped him in, said a few things, but it isn't so much what you say, it's the resonance that's coming out of your voice and through your body that has the impact in the room. And so I'm deliberately setting the field by the way I show up
Mm,
and what I'm saying and the resonance with which I'm saying. And the only way that resonance comes through is if I'm speaking from that state, as that state, that I'm wanting them to set the field so they have more access to the depth that we're going to move into. And and then the conversation opened up. We had an extraordinary couple hours, and he comes up to me afterwards and says, "What did you do?"
mm,
And he said, "Dare I say, I'm not a spiritual person, but that was spiritual. I felt this wave go through the room. What did you do?" And I said, "Well, that's a longer conversation." But that's the kind of catalytic power that I'm talking about. And everybody got it. Whether they got it here or not is another story, but they got it in their body. And that actually catalyzed for him uh, a journey that he's still on. And so you
Interesting.
can call that spiritual. Okay, there's a system, or you can just say, this is how reality works. Can we get more in touch with how reality actually works so that we can have more vitality, more creativity, more joy, uh, greater impact, and actually access the levers that by which the universe works and manifestation
Yeah,
happens?
yeah, yeah. Let me pick up on something that came out once or twice. You even mentioned it at the very beginning that you have a personal meditational practice for decades. And the word spiritual came up once or twice. We're not going to get lost into definitions here. Everybody may have
Yeah.
his own definitions, which is obviously beyond and different than religion. My question leads to making it practical as a journey for people that want to learn that. It appears that if you want to grow into these meta capacities, it appears, that's a question, to be indispensable to have some kind of spiritual practice. By spiritual, I mean in a broader sense, deeply
Yeah.
introspective,
Yeah.
reflective, and
Yeah.
looking for an inner growth, the inner state, and having a way how to observe it, how
Yeah.
to nurture it, and actually how to expand it. Would that be true? That it's kind of indispensable that you need that introspective spiritual practice. Otherwise, you will not live up to these meta capacities.
Yeah. How to answer that? You don't need to call it spiritual at all. If you look, say, at what we're doing in the academy, it's really energetic practice. Everything is energy.
Can you maybe elaborate? What do you mean by energetic practices? And
Well, um, the body is an energetic field. If you get into the quantum science, there's no material there. There is no matter. Matter isn't a scientific term, mass is. And if you look at Einstein, E equals mc squared. So energy, when it congeals, frequency slows down, it becomes what we call mass or matter,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we are an energetic system. Well, there are practices that allow you to open the floodgates, if you will, run
Hmm.
higher frequency and more current through your body. And these open up these capacities that I'm talking about. It also invites shadow in a big way. So, which is an invitation to like, here's where energy is tied up in you. Here's where it gets blocked. Here's in essence the capacity that you've cut off. So, that's what we're teaching in the academy is how do you open your field? I mean, real simple is just breath work. How do you just consciously breathe?
Okay.
But then you can also bring your attention to your heart. And if you just do that, breathe with attention in your heart, just for a few minutes, you might notice there's a feeling of joy that starts, just the edge of joy that starts to
Okay.
hit there. That's energy. And then how do you allow that to build and then circulate through your body? There, how do you open up and down to allow more current to flow through? These practices have been in the traditions, but they've also been, I learned a lot of them at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. And so you can call that spiritual, fine. Um, I just think this is that reality is an energetic reality, and we're learning how to work with it more.
Okay. Well, you mentioned one verb, which I want to pick up on, which is learn. And there's no doubt in my mind, obviously not in yours, that this can be learned.
Yes.
Some people coming more from a traditional management skills aspect would say, well, you can certainly teach certain skills, but that inner state, inner development, that self that emerges, that connection to that sense of unity, very difficult to learn, if not, if at all. What would you say to those people, and how easy, how difficult is this? Something that anybody could learn? Is this
Yeah.
probably a never-ending journey? Or give us a flavor on the learnability of what
It's it's
you're
highly
observing.
learnable. It's who we are. It's what we are. It's completely learnable. We say it's hard because we have a very outdated paradigm of how things actually work.
Hmm.
So we don't we haven't learned the methodologies and practices that actually open this stuff up pretty quickly. We were in a workshop, um, uh, and there was a person in there, and we did some deep shadow work, and he touched into some of that for himself, and it was like, wow, I never knew that was even there. And then later, I was leading a meditation or a kind of guided meditation into a deep state of the field. And he had a complete, like, unitive experience. And I was talking to him just the other day, 2 years later, and he says, that opened me up in ways that I had no idea. Just those two experiences. So this is immediately accessible. We drop people in, they start to have experience right away. Sometimes the energy that comes in hits their shadows and they start to feel nauseous or like, whoa, that's really up. I'm not used to running that kind of current through my body. And then when you spend more time they drop into the nauseous and you've got a whole history there of trauma. And so this is, I think, readily available, but we've been operating in a very materialistic paradigm, which would say this isn't even this isn't even in the realm of possibility.
Mm.
So I don't think it's hard. I just think we haven't tried. And the old ways of more rational strategic planning, action planning, even feedback and so on is doesn't get at this in the same way. Even reflection and journaling it does open, and that's an important part of it. But we're talking about directly teaching methodology that opens up the field.
Let me actually share quickly for those that haven't caught it yet. All of this can be looked up, and Bob materializes and brings it to other people in his Unity Academy. So I'm just showing the link again. There's not a publicity stunt, but I thought, why not share it right away so you don't have to look up for it. We had a great event in Barcelona with Otto Schama, and he'll be on the show in 2 dates from now, sometime in, I think, in April. But what I want to reflect on is things that he said that reminded me deeply of your observations. And he talks about 3 capabilities that are underrated in contrast to the current obsession of being their opposite, being overrated. He talks about knowing is overrated, not knowing is underrated, and people should allow specific leaders the not knowing. He talks about comfort and control being overrated versus discomfort. And the last one is very interesting, and I would like you to comment again, not to comment on what Otto says, but on that notion, because I think it's so counterintuitive for business leaders. He says what is overrated is action, and what is underrated, it needs to develop a lot more, is non-action, holding still, allowing stillness as a source of creativity, adding my words. And I would like you to explore on that aspect very much, because I think it's so key, on that allowing stillness, listening, and not withstanding this tendency to act, to decide.
Yeah. Well, this is go back to Aikido. That I'm moving from. I'm not even moving. It's moving me. I'm still. And the Aikido that's unfolding is dust after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually in motion before my opponent moves. So I'm in the field, right? And so in a way, there's non-action here. One of the business leaders that came through the academy, I was just talking with him recently, and we had a long conversation about how easeful it is, how little he's doing, and how the organization is just opening up. I just sit in these meetings and there's so much more creativity. It's like a whole different quality. And all I have to do is sort of nudge it and be present and support it. He's in a completely different relationship with his leadership, and the business results are measurably better. And he credits that to the very thing you're talking about. I'm doing so much less with great ease, right in the middle of it. So
Interesting. That reminds me of a sentence, I think it's out of the book Mastering Leadership, where I think one of the key messages is that conscious leaders will outperform less conscious leaders every time, because they're simply more effective. And you resonate that with saying the higher you develop as I don't know if there's a word, do you use reactive, creative leaders and then unity leaders, or?
in our model, it's integral and then unity. So I'm not
Okay.
collapsing those two, but I'm saying as you move into this later stage, what Terry calls meta awareness, you start to experience more the underlying unity. Like when Gorbachev says, "I'm here to deprive you of an enemy," the boundaries are starting between a me and a you are starting to
Yeah.
dissolve a bit.
Yeah. And what I was referring to was that sentence that higher consciousness leaders outperform lower consciousness leaders. Do you have any example, even in real life, of a leader that, in your humble perspective, displays integral levels of leadership? And maybe you can quote whether you think that it is observable that there's actually a higher leader that is leading to a higher performance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rare actually. When you do studies on this, you have to kind of force an upwardly biased sample to find
Mm,
people operating at this level. Um, so if you look at, say, Keegan's work, self-authoring, um, about 70% of people are operating maybe at there. And then when you start to get into the next point, it gets thinner. By the time you get to what would be fully mature integral, you're looking at a thin slice of a thinner slice of leaders. So it's hard to find. Um, I don't want to mention names here, but we have a client, big client, playing globally, and when we first met him, he was highly reactive, and Bill was coaching him, came in to give him his feedback, and the first thing he said was, "I just want you to know, I'm not going to hug you when you leave." That was his opening statement, pretty aggressively. And then he had an amazing conversation. Um, and we've watched his profile go from high reactive over years now to high creative. Uh,
mm,
and potentially he's pushing into integral and is now the CEO of the company. And it's a very big global business, and they're taking on, um, and they're working with Nature Conservancy. They're taking on the global challenge of impacting the environment. And they're in agribusiness, and they think we can change the world. We can actually help reforest the planet by how we do and transform agriculture. And so they're leading a very global integral vision. And as Arlo Sharma said, living in the unknown of that, because nobody knows
mm.
how to do it. And it means a complete radical transformation of their business in order to do that. So yes, I do think they're out there. I could mention a couple other stories like that. Whereas, we had one where and this is the power of consulting. I was working with another consultant. We came in and helped this organization develop a new vision and strategy for the organization. And I'm convinced, because they broke through, they were literally standing in a circle at the end in tears going, "This wasn't in the room when we came together. How did this emerge? This is amazing. We could transform healthcare in the whole country with this." And literally they were positioned to do that in this organization in that country. And I know that it was the presence, just the silent presence, that my colleague and I showed up. He's a Buddhist meditator, and I have my own practice. And we just showed up, and stuff happened. And they couldn't explain how it emerged, but it emerged. And but the leader was operating probably early self-authoring. Beautiful man, very dedicated. He got the vision. He was on fire with it, but he couldn't lead it. He wasn't complex enough yet at,
Okay.
at a later stage to lead it. So it didn't actually materialize. And so this is the um, the leadership imperative in these times, that we move not only from reactive to creative, but make the next move, because the complexities of what we're in demand it.
Mm. Let me probe on a different angle because I think it's worthwhile for the audience. When we had our first conversation, I'm talking 11, 12 months back, and you pointed me to Unity Academy, and there's some interesting interviews you do.
Yeah.
And the reason why I mention them is there's a lot of science, and I'm not inviting you to explain the science. We don't have the time, and that
Yeah.
probably is going way too overboard for the audience. But maybe you can just hint and point to what are real data points upon which these meta capacities are grounded, that it's real. Some of them in quantum physics and some of them on studies, how intuition and these other states of
Yeah.
awareness actually are measurable, just pointing to them so that people can form their own opinion. it's not just make believe. There's
No.
some real scientific research that these capacities work and how they work.
And really, I was privileged to have these conversations because these are people that have made a massive contributions. One was Federico Fagin. Federico invented the microprocessor and the technology that made it happen. So literally, he invented what are now our computers and a whole lot of other stuff. He's got this inventive. He's a serial entrepreneur, serial
Mm.
inventor, and a physicist, quantum physicist. And
He was in Barcelona actually
was
last
he?
summer for the
Yeah,
Festival of Consciousness.
yeah. He's amazing. And he wrote a book now on physics of here's how the universe actually is conscious. Consciousness is fundamental. And so there's a whole scientific perspective that's emerging that that reality is conscious. And it's not an artifact of accidents that happen
Yeah,
and things come together and then a brain emerges. No, the reality is actually conscious and self-evolving and self-organizing, self-learning. Um, great neuro neurologist David Weaver's credited with massive medical breakthrough in stroke epidemiology and progression and how to treat it. He got it all in a shower, just like that. It took 20 years of research to unpack that and prove it.
mm.
It all proved out. So here's, so we're working with people at the leading edge of science and saying, this is how this stuff is applicable. Like
Yeah,
it's how you invent, it's like the genesis of invention. And then uh, there's all the study that's been done on this research, on this kind of meta capacity. There's unbelievable amounts of good, rigorous research that's been done to show that people have this capacity and it's real.
yeah,
And somebody once said to me, I don't, I really value the leadership circle because it's grounded in science. This stuff is not. And I'm going, no, 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 no. You missed the point. It actually is more rigorously scientifically researched than the leadership circle.
okay, interesting.
Intuition has more scientific research behind it, good research.
And oh, interesting, I didn't know that.
Clairvoyance, the ability,
Yeah,
all of these capacities that come in have been thoroughly researched. And so there's a lot of science behind this. That's why I'm saying you can call it spiritual, but you can also just say, here's how reality works. Let's get on with it.
yeah, thanks for that. I'm leaning into the last question, and I'm happy to do the last question unless there's somebody from the audience that wants to chip in. Well, my last question is something that is dear to conscious capitalists as well as to Buddhist practitioners in this case. It's about ethics. And why to bring up ethics? Because one of my teachers actually once told me that you can do a lot of the practices, and actually that is true for a lot of the meta capacities. But if you have a negative intention, you can use many of these capacities to actually then be an excellent sharpshooter. Okay.
Yeah.
In which way would you say that practicing these meta capacities is kind of embedded that leaders will end up with the intention to do good versus, well, not automatically, and genuine ethics is important to be added? In which way is it intrinsic versus not so much in your meta capacities to do good once you practice these higher levels of leadership?
Yeah. One of the things David Weaver says in his book, A Theory of Reality, notice he's using the language reality, it's like a whole new paradigm of reality. He's the neurologist. Starts his book with the brain is not responsible for your thinking or your consciousness. That's a bold statement from a neurologist, world leading. He says that a positive intention, altruistic intention, higher aspiration opens this stuff up much more readily.
Mm.
And I do agree that you can, there's dark magic, there's dark, it can be used for other ends. But when you open into this, the primary experiences of one of incredible love, like at the end of the academy, we finished a healing, and this guy was doing this energy work, healing work with his partner, and I went over to check in on him, and he said, "I feel like I'm going to pass out." So we just sat him down, and I helped him ground, and I said, "What's going on
Mm.
with you?" He said, "I didn't know I had this much love in me. I, I, my love is so big." And then he dropped into when he knew that as a child, and we had this whole experience of how that got shut down as a child. But he knew, and it was so powerful for him. It's like it overwhelmed him. And so when you open into these things, the primary experiences of one of unity, one of connection, one of love, one of embrace. And so I think it naturally moves you toward service to others.
Yeah, I kind of expected you would answer like that because that's my own very limited, humble experience too. It will lead you to a um, benevolent action.
Yeah.
With this, beautiful. Bob, thanks a lot. This was great. Time flew by, and I had the pleasure and actually the generosity from the audience to be able to ask all the questions that I had on my mind. I hope it was interesting. Thanks, everybody. We will have our next dialogue with Lynn Twist. You may know her from The Soul of Money, and we'll actually dive into the soul or the energy of money and what it actually does to leaders and companies. That's on March 3rd. Mark your calendar. And again, thank you, Bob, for being with us. Thanks in the audience, and welcome. Unwind your microphones and say a big